Hello, everybody. Time for the XP Billionaires podcast. This is Rafe Thegrum, and I am joined by my two co-hosts. I've got Sky Knight. How are you doing today?
Oh, pretty good, pretty good.
Excellent. And I've got Irene Rogue. How are you doing today?
There's a Pokemon ghost, like a ghost Pokemon that's Ghost Leaf, and it's called Pumpkaboo, and I love it.
Yeah, that one's been around for a while.
I know.
All right. Well, I think that's the happiest we're probably going to be with this week's episode. So let's get on to our incredibly depressing topic this week, shall we?
It's not depressing. We're just gonna make everybody angry with us.
Depresses me.
What, that we're gonna make everybody angry with us?
Well, yeah, I like my listeners.
I mean, I like our listeners too, but I also feel like at this point that they understand that we have a perspective, especially after doing that long episode on queer baiting. Like, this is not going to be new.
No, fair enough. All right. Well, when a game decides to have a heavy narrative focus, a lot of the time we can see the writers putting in a little bit more of a political message into their stories. Regardless of whether or not they had planned for it, it just kind of happens. Depending on the story, the political aspects or the political intrigue can be completely ignored in order to properly enjoy the game. But sometimes the message is loud and clear, and it actually really expands the overall enjoyment of the game because you're involved in such a fantastic story. So this week, I thought we'd talk about a couple of games that were made better, in my opinion, because of their political message. Whether or not that's relevant to today's political climate, well, you guys can be the judge.
Like, they are a product of their time in some cases, but I find that, like, games in general, like most media, are better when they have something to say.
Well, exactly. I mean, whether it's a moral of the story, you can get something as simple as that, but, a political message, especially in situation stories that are more, cyberpunk, for example, they really, really emphasize, corporate governments and corporate takeovers, and then just add a really nice sci-fi element to it. This is a future. These are futures we could see. So when a game does this, really, it can be a very eye-opening experience.
Yeah, and like honestly, it makes for a better game in my opinion when it actually takes a stance and says something about its world and its characters. Anyway, we'll get into it later. But yeah, games are political, just like all art form, even if it's in there subtly, in my opinion. But that's just me.
Suck it.
Thank you, Sky.
All right. So let's get started with the first game we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about Judgment, a very recent game with a very, very interesting political message. So, Judgment is a prime example of the rich wanting nothing more than to get richer, and the politicians who wish to keep it that way. So you wouldn't suspect that at first, whether you've played the game at just the beginning of the game or you've watched any of the trailers. Like Judgment starts out as just a case about a serial killer. And this eventually turns itself into a massive government conspiracy. Eventually, you're led to the state-of-the-art medical research facility just out of town. And after some in-depth investigation, you basically learn that the facility was initially built by the Ministry of Health as this place for retired politicians to just have a nice cushy job after their retirement, running the facility and still getting a paycheck. Now, this facility hadn't made any significant breakthroughs since its establishment, and the land was actually initially slated to be sold and the facility torn down. But that was until someone claimed to have come across a breakthrough treatment for Alzheimer's. Once they made that announcement, the government was in no position to get rid of the facility, which screwed out the landowner who was planning to buy it. At the same time, even though you find out that there were nothing but failed medical trials, some of which weren't exactly legal, it just showed that the government was willing to do anything to keep this facility going. So the message here really is, sure, an Alzheimer's drug is something the world truly needs, and we should be researching something like that. Absolutely, I have no problems with that, and we should be focusing on it. It's a serious disease. But what really stands out is the initial reason for this facility, not what it's actually been able to provide at this point. All the rich want to do is to keep making more money. It's, we've heard it all over the place. It's not about getting money, it's about getting all the money. The only thing that was really missing with this facility was whether or not the pharmaceutical corporations were a part of developing this treatment once it was announced. They didn't really explain that too much, but it wouldn't surprise me if they actually were. So this is really this spoke to me in a lot of ways, because while I haven't seen something like that happen here or in North America, I don't think it hasn't happened, and I don't think it wouldn't happen if somebody actually thought about it.
I mean, to be honest, a lot of some of the greatest inventions that we have are happy accidents. We didn't come out like trying to build this thing, but we found, hey, we can actually capitalize on it to not even do good, but to like make some money, you know?
Oh,
Like,
absolutely. I mean, the arms industry in and of itself just finds new and innovative ways to kill people. So,
and honestly, it's not a huge stretch to say they're the reason we have the internet and Wi-Fi.
no, no, you're absolutely right.
So like, it happens all the time. I also want to point out like a good thing that this does as well is that like a lot of products that are made for people with disabilities are marketed towards able-bodied people as well in order to produce enough scale in order to make them viable commercial products. Ideally, we wouldn't need to necessarily sell those products at scale in order to get them out to the people who need them. But it's a way at least that we get those sorts of things out into the market into the hands of the people that actually need them. It's good and bad now that I say it out loud.
Exactly. Yeah, it's interesting. There's always two sides of the coin, and you have to see which side is heavier.
Yeah, and actually, just recently there was like a chair. I'm not sure if you guys remember this or saw it online, but there was a chair that was like you'd strap it to like the backs of your thighs, and when you would sit down, some legs would come out, and it would allow you to sit wherever. And it was being marketed as like the chair for lazy people who don't like to stand. And I saw several, disability activists on social media talking about how actually this isn't necessarily for lazy people. It's for disabled people, but it's being marketed towards lazy people in order to have enough market share in order to be a viable product.
Wow. Yeah, I'd missed that one, but
I did too. The whole problem with that scenario, of course, is that it just becomes another way for people to shit on disabled people and make them feel bad for needing the tools to get through their life.
Oh, agreed. But it would also be nice to see like if we could normalize. I don't know. There's an argument to be said for like normalizing it so that no one questions having them, but also something to be said for like it's nobody's business why you have these things, and they should just leave you the fuck alone.
I think in general about a lot of things, the world would be a much better place if people learned to mind their own fucking business.
Like somebody having one of those chairs doesn't hurt me any, so why am I gonna like speculate as to why they need them, you know? It's a lot of time and energy I could be, using to catch Pokemon.
Exactly.
all right. So, what other games do we want to talk about?
Well, I'm going to talk about Fire Emblem Path of Radiance because I threatened to talk about Suikoden in this episode, but I talk about Suikoden a lot, so I'll talk about the game that most reminds me of Suikoden in terms of plot. So, Path of Radiance, a highly political game in that it involves a single continent, several countries, and allying most of those countries against one of them. So it takes place on the continent of Tellius. The story is all about, like I said, uniting the continent against one of the countries, Diane, who's got rather expansionist personalities in government, including a gentleman they call the Mad King. And the sort of initial incident is Diane taking over the small country of Crimea. So, we have the highly unlikely alliance of a mercenary band and an inexperienced princess in exile trying to grow an army to take back her country.
Crimea's a bit on the nose as well. Jesus.
Yeah. It's a strange team to be running around essentially healing divides around the continent. I mean, it involves a lot of diplomatic work. Again, inexperienced princess and mercenaries. Yay. So, there's two main racial groups on Tellius. The Baoric, which are basically humans as we know them, and the Lagus, which are animal-esque people of different types. There are hawk people, there are cat people, there are wolf people, that sort of thing. So these two groups are deeply suspicious of one another, if not openly hostile. And in fact, some of their, two of the countries are essentially divided along racial lines. Benyon is mostly Bjoric, and Gallia is where the Lagus are, basically. This makes it more than a little difficult to reestablish relations and getting them willing to work together, especially when their cultures are so different, their beliefs are so different. They believe all sorts of crazy things about one another. And
That's not like real life at all.
Yeah, I know, right? Also, there's also the really unfortunate fact is that one clan of Lagus, the Heron clan, who were basically almost universally respected among the other Lagus. Well, there's only 3 of them left now.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
I feel like that's by design. Like, the people that made it their business to get rid of them, essentially. Made it their business to get rid of them.
Yeah, so, in other words, nearly complete genocide.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't help. It really didn't help.
Genocide usually doesn't, no.
So, yes, I mean, this is what Ike, the protagonist, one of the mercenaries, and Princess Valencia had to deal with. And, well, they did it, but only because they weren't bigots. That's a good life lesson for us all. Don't be a bigot.
I mean, it's so easy. It was a meme I saw on Twitter today. It costs $0 to not be like that.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's like neither of them were terribly experienced, diplomats or anything. They were just good people. Why are so many people not willing to just be good people? I don't know. Anyway, I'm through with my rant. That's my political game.
This to me is that definite story about how the little guy can actually make a difference if they all stand up. So I think the short message for this is vote.
Vote and vote like it's you who will be experiencing the worst of the horrible things that are going to happen. Vote like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So yeah, that's really what I get out of it. It is really the power of the minority, which is really interesting.
And one very good point that the game makes is that if you all stand up and fight for what's right, you are the majority.
That's the thing, right?
Yeah, certain groups with questionable ideologies, we'll put it that way, they win because they divide their opponents.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes, I am done with this rant.
Vote like you're a black trans woman.
Pretty much.
All right. So yeah, so what else have we got? Irene, what can you come up with that gives us that political message?
So, not surprising, since a few people have heard me talking about it on Twitter, I want to talk about the Outer Worlds a little bit. And how the game would have been poorer for its exclusion of its central theme, that capitalism as a system, sucks balls. Like, really sucks. And, like, anybody who thinks that the Outer Worlds is apolitical or doesn't have, isn't putting its thumb on the scale in favor of one system versus another, I think is capable of mental gymnastics, the likes of which should not be possible. Like, there are definitely choices that you're presented with in the game where it's like, okay, well, like, here are your two options. Some of them, like, neither of them look particularly great because no matter what you do, somebody's going to suffer, and you don't necessarily want people to suffer. But also, like, the system that upholds the only reason that people are suffering in the first place is that you have this conflict, and they make it understood in no uncertain terms, is because you have these, like, 10 corporations, 10 or 12 corporations, I can't quite remember how many, that own the entire fucking galaxy. And when I say own the entire galaxy, I mean the people living in it too. So, like, from its opening cinematic, where we see Phineas calling someone a bootlicker as he runs away, to our first forays into Edgewater, where we discover that every individual is basically living in a corporate fief, and they are serfs. I'll give you an example. The first man you encounter when you walk into Edgewater is a gravedigger, and he has a quest for you. It's to collect grave fees. And it's like, okay, why am I collecting grave fees? He's like, oh, for like relatives who have passed away? No, your own. He's basically like a death tax, literally. The company, if you don't pay these fees, will throw your body into the wilderness when you die.
I bet a lot of people would just say, fuck it then, throw my body to the wolves?
I mean, yes, but also like your relatives would have nowhere to go to like visit you. Like, there's a certain symbolism towards like, I am paying for the maintenance of my own goddamn grave and I'm not even fucking using it yet. And when I am, I won't give a shit. It's like the ultimate useless. Tax isn't the right word for it. It's basically like a corporate deduction off their paychecks that everyone is expected to pay. And I'm like reeling from this as I go into Edgewater for the first time. And one of the people who you go to collect these fees from is this woman. And you find out that fees aren't for her, they're for another dude who just recently passed away. Now, slight trigger warning for those of you who might be uncomfortable with the topic of suicide or self-harm. It happens all off screen, and it's all said and done, and the character is barely named. The purpose of it is not necessarily shock people with, like, somebody killed themselves. It's to shock people with everybody with the reaction afterwards. Because when you meet this woman, and she explains that the guy killed himself, the reason she's paying the grave fees is so that they don't have to be fined. Like, their town, Edgewater, would be fined significantly more money if the company found out he killed himself. Because that crime, as they explain it, is referred to as God, I'm paraphrasing, but it is vandalism resulting in permanent damage to company property. That is somebody's life. And everyone in town treats that like it's totally fucking normal.
And this is why human rights are important.
Yeah, so in that little area in Edgewater, and this is like the starting area, so I'm not getting too deep into spoiler territory. You've actually discovered there's a group of defectors, people who have left the town behind and are like trying to make it on their own in a sort of commune way. And you have no choice but to either divert the power away from their commune, causing it to fail, and everybody going back to Edgewater to be, corporate slaves, literally, or diverting power away from Edgewater and to the commune, which will result in the death of Edgewater, and the corporation won't care about those people. That's the thing. Your choice is, I very obviously don't want to destroy this like commune of people who don't want to live with a boot on their neck. But by doing this, I am condemning the people of Edgewater to death because their corporate masters won't give a shit about them when they're up shit creek because they can't produce anymore. They're worthless. So unless those people decide to go and join the commune, they're likely going to die. Whereas, the people in the commune would at least be welcome back and be given a chance to live. But is it living? Like, the whole game is basically like this situation that has been set up by these 10 corporations that own everything. And now you have to deal with, people's messy lives getting in the way of that plan. And I was like going in full ready to like burn everything to the ground because fuck all that shit. It's bad. But then it was I still decided to fuck all that shit. But I did it with a little bit more reverence, you know? Like the weight of my decision was not necessarily made unclear to me. I liked the fact that yeah, while it was definitely tipping its thumb in favor of like fuck this shit. It was also not necessarily shying away from like okay, well there are going to be consequences for us doing this. Tearing down the system without a plan results in
Disaster.
exactly. And I actually really appreciated that it had this like subtle like it still gave you the player the option and the agency to pick which side they were going to fall on, but the way it was presented, like the out of control corporate greed that caused human life to be worth so little that when somebody commits suicide in a tragic and an event that should be tragic and sad, it can be detrimental to everyone around them in that the corporation will now fine you for their lost productivity. Like, no. There was also a whole other side quest where, like, there was a man who needed medication, but, like, he was old and no longer worthy of medical treatment. Like, holy shit, it was dark.
And I'll repeat for emphasis, and this is why human rights are important.
Exactly. And like, I know some folks will be like, well, that's fine. Like, I still got the old Fallout games to go play if the Outer Worlds is far too, like, political for me to really get into. Fallout's super fucking political as well. Its message is fundamentally anti-war. Like, the whole point of the Fallout series is that humanity, instead of actually changing, destroyed itself in the ultimate and final act of destruction that it would ever get to perpetuate against itself. I don't even think they actually really get into like the specifics of sides, and all you know is it was a war over resources because people need, like, of course, we'd run out because we weren't careful with them. We didn't take care of the planet, which resulted in war, which resulted in us getting rid of all the other resources in nuclear fire. Like, despite the game being ostensibly about shooting your way through a wasteland full of radioactive mutants and giant bugs, ultimately it's a sad and glaring testament to mankind's fallibility that we let it get this bad. You know, like, we shouldn't have let it get that bad.
And that's the ultimate message. War is pointless.
Nobody wins.
Yeah.
Nobody won. No matter how many, like, super mutants you get to, like, snipe with your awesome sniper rifle, it's ultimately not going to get you any closer to what you need. And that's what like I said at the top of this episode, I think these games would be poorer for not including these themes. Like, even Borderlands has a certain, like, anti-capitalist bent to it. When you start to get into, like, all of the political and corporate intrigue going on behind all of the weapons manufacturers, they're all weapons manufacturers. Don't kid yourself. There isn't a single corporation of any note in that whole world that doesn't manufacture guns.
That's terrifying.
Yup, that, and they're like branded. They all have like a gimmick because they have to stand out in a crowded marketplace. I love Borderlands, don't get me wrong. The guns are really cool. They're also kind of horrifying when you think about them too much.
Yeah, it's a situation where, I like them in my fiction. I don't want them as fact.
No, I'd rather not be like, oh yeah, my whole house is branded Malawan, and the reason they have like money to, make all of these products is because their primary product is guns sold to mercenaries and corporate private armies.
Yikes.
Yeah.
On that happy note, yeah, I think we'll wrap it up this time around. So, yeah, these are just some of the examples of the stories that you'll find with political messages in your RPG gaming. And if you really think about it and if you really dig deep into some of your favorite games, you might actually see something in there too. And what you take away from that is completely up to you. If you choose to ignore it, also your call. But if you really enjoy a good story, I hope you take the time to kind of dig into something from what you're looking for. So, yeah, if you guys want to mention any games that have a political message that you might want to shoot our way, definitely feel free to do so. You can reach me on Twitter at BillionairesXP. You can also find me on Instagram at Ray Fegram and streaming on Twitch Wednesday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern, also at Ray Fegram. Irene, where can everyone find you?
You can find me at irogue_XP on Twitter and Twitch. I normally stream on Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So come check it out.
And Sky, where can everyone find you?
I'm at SkyKnightXP on Twitter and Twitch, SkyKnight.xp on Instagram, and I stream on Tuesday evenings, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Excellent. And check out our website for news, updates, and transcripts for our episodes. That's at xpbillionaires.wordpress.com. And check out our transcriber, Hannah Bard, at xp_hobo on Twitter. They tend to have some good insights here and there as well. Lastly, our coffee page is where we do our monthly newsletter and talk about any new special streams. We've posted up what to expect for the rest of this year, so definitely go check out the post we made for that. It's coffee.com/xpbillionaires. All right, well, that's going to be it for the XP Billionaires this week. And, we talk a lot about political messages today, but really the only one we talk about every episode is that you need to keep gaming. We'll see you next week.
Is that political?
Close enough.